Children are sacred beings. They each occupy a point of consciousness in the universe that has never been occupied before and will never be occupied again. And they each have a birthright to experience delight and joy, health and well-being, to be safe and secure, to unfold to their fullest promise by being nourished in body, mind, and spirit, to be loved, and to live in peace. In far too many instances, children are not given these things. Formal education is critical in children's lives, but so is play and games and imagination, both of the structured and the unstructured kinds. Play is like a door ajar. If this room right now were totally dark and there were light out in the hallway and you got up and you opened the door just a crack, what would happen? A shaft of light would come into the room and would dissolve the darkness. Would an equal shaft of darkness from this room enter the hallway? No, because light always overcomes darkness. Play and imagination is that door ajar for children, even in the most dire circumstance. Play has a significant role in children's lives because it helps to develop emotional, cognitive, social, and moral values and skills that will help them to negotiate later stages of development and the challenges of interpersonal relationships. Every child, no matter what the circumstance, seeks a place of significance in the world that will be acknowledged and cherished by the adults within the environment. I have found in working with street kids in New York City that even those kids who are not embedded and embraced by a family structure create their own family structure amongst themselves, with a father figure and a mother figure and so on. In finding a place of significance, children need to participate. And children who've been traumatized often shut down in their natural exuberance to play and to engage with other people. And so the process of involving them in play is one of invitation. And in our discussions about what your organization has been doing, it seems to me that that approach has been taken and it has been successful. One must spend time, and patient time, with children who have been traumatized because understandably they will hold a shield against any further hurt or damage to themselves. And that might result in a child, from our perspective, who is sullen, silent, angry, withdrawn, and they will further retreat into that corner unless we earn the right to engage them in a process of communication. That process of communication between you and me, for instance, would be in words. With children, it often is not in words. That's the first thing they will do, is stop talking. Because words are inadequate to express the depth of the feeling that they have. Even we as adults sometimes are speechless because we can't communicate what is deeply in our heart. So play is extremely useful in engaging a child who has withdrawn because it's less threatening to them. Their vocabularies, by the way, are not as broad or sophisticated as ours. Not in words. They have a different vocabulary. For quite a number of years, I worked with autistic children. From our perspective, we would see an autistic child who is sitting in a corner, maybe just taking their shoelace and flipping it back and forth, and that's all they seem to be doing. They're not looking at us, they're not engaging with us in communication, and yet what I have found in working with autistic kids is that they're very much aware. In fact, they're acutely aware of what is going on around them. Some hypothesize, in fact, that autistic children don't have the natural filters that we have of blocking out certain extraneous information and being able to focus. They're getting all this information in all of their senses simultaneously, and so they begin to shut down. I have found with autistic children that sitting with them somewhat beyond their perimeter of personal space and just talking with them in a calm voice usually results in time, a glance, and then the beginning of a nonverbal communication. The perimeter of personal space is very important. There was a child I was working with once whose personal space was a radius of maybe 20 feet. And I'll illustrate that by saying that if I went any closer than 20 feet to him, he would physically pull himself in. So what I did was just sit down right at that point where he began to tense up. And over a period of time, days, he permitted me to move closer to him. And when I say he permitted me, he just was more and more comfortable as I got closer. I guess underlying all that I'm saying with traumatized children is that we must be extremely patient. They have defenses that cannot and should not be broken. Even though we might feel an urgency to reach these children, the defenses are there for a reason. Even though the danger might no longer be present, the danger is now internalized and is within. The expectation that they are still in jeopardy remains. The breach of trust that was experienced in the trauma continues to inform their view of the world as an unsafe place, and no amount of talking on our part is going to convince them otherwise. Play provides a less fraught engagement in communication. It's like that door ajar where light begins to come in, and delight is born. Trauma is destructive, and the opposite of destruction is creation. And so in offering children who have been traumatized an opportunity to play, you're offering them an opportunity to create something out of the darkness of the destructive experience. That's not necessarily a direct connection between destruction and creation, but children by their nature see the world as new in every moment. Children live in the present moment. Adults have a lot behind them and a lot in front of them. In the past, we have memories of the past, we have anticipations of the future. Children don't have those two, I'm imagining it's like a river with these two banks, and here's the bank of the past, here's the bank of the future. And children float and swim more freely right in the present moment. They, however, sometimes because of trauma, get stuck on the shore of the past. And every anticipation they have of the future is colored by a past memory, a bad past memory. Quite honestly, there's nothing we can do about that. The memory is there. We cannot wash it away. What we can do in offering them an experience of play and creativity and delight is to bring them off that shore of the past back into the flow of the present moment, creating a new and happy memory, even in just a moment, which now becomes part of the repository of their anticipation of the future. Because all anticipations of the future come from the past. Memories create anticipations, and every memory is born in the present moment. Everything emanates from and returns to the present moment. Children are emissaries to the adult world of the present moment. Traumatized children have left that temporarily and are stuck in a past moment. It is our responsibility to invite them back into the flow of the present moment. And again, I have to underscore that that must be done with great respect for the child and patience for the process. If I held two tuning forks in my hands and I struck one, and it begins to resonate with the sound, and I brought this one close to it, within several inches, this one would begin to resonate without even making physical contact. It resonates with the vibration here. That is a metaphor for empathy. And I think that engagement with children requires an empathic approach, which is an approach of feeling with the child, as opposed to a sympathetic approach, which is feeling for the child. It is natural and normal for most adults, when they see a child in pain or in fear, to feel sympathy for that child and want to embrace the child and to make all of the bad feelings go away. And sometimes that is ameliorative for the situation and is very helpful. And there's nothing wrong with that. But therapeutically speaking, and there is a therapeutic component to what we're talking about, the proper approach is empathy, which again requires sitting with the child and getting a sense of what their tune is, watching the child. Again, you and I, we would have words. We could tell each other what we're feeling. But we have other sense modalities that can be very useful in understanding what a child is going through and what they're trying to communicate. All of that said, every child has a different tune. Quite literally, some children, the door ajar is music. With some children, it is painting. With some children, it is dance and physical movement. It's a mistake for us to have any kind of an agenda with any particular child and bring that in like, oh, I have all these crayons or chalks or paints and draw a picture. Because many children, especially traumatized children, will not know what to do with that. And any kind of physical movement is an opening for the possibility in their minds of further hurt to themselves. Again, it's a process of slow, empathic understanding of what the child is interested in. I think the proper approach might be to provide a variety of things, not too many, because that can be overwhelming. And then see what the child might pick up. I have found when working with children that sometimes clay is an excellent modality of play. I'll sit down with a child, I'll have a ball of soft red clay, and I'll just form it and knead it. I won't make anything, because a lot of children are very concerned that they can't make something perfect. That's work to make something perfect. We're talking about play. So we have to play to sometimes demonstrate to the child that it's okay to play, which is a challenge for some adults. because we've been taught that at a certain point in our lives we cross a threshold from play to work. But there's always the child inside. There are always the indelible memories of our own childhood. And being with children brings that out in a very informed way. It's not immaturity, it's a kind of mature childlikeness. Anyway, sitting with a child, I'll have some clay and I'll be kneading it, and the child will have a ball of clay, and we'll just see if they pick it up. And then maybe I'll smell it, or I might taste it, and they'll see that. They might think that's a little funny. As soon as there's a smile, as soon as there's a giggle, and there can be, in even the most traumatized child, that moment of delight, because it's waiting inside to come out, just peeking out. And sometimes we have to invite that by being playful ourselves. And then it's not unusual that the child begins then to play with the clay or the other materials that we might have. A little, what do you call the little instrument that you hit with a xylophone, or whatever it might be, a drum, a rattle, just something, a rattle, a drum, just beating some time, and the child becomes interested. But to just repeat one more time, every child has their own tune, and it's up to us to be creative enough to provide the opportunity for them to engage. Back to the image I mentioned before about the room being dark. We open the door a bit and a shaft of light comes in and dissolves the darkness. It doesn't just illuminate the person who opened the door. It illuminates the entire room. Similarly, children live within a context of perhaps other children, other adults. When a change begins to occur in a child, when the shield begins to be laid down of defense, that's going to impact the interpersonal context of the child. There'll be relief, there'll be some joy, and that hopefully will be self-fulfilling, that the child's coming out of the darkness of their trauma will be nourished by the surround, the interpersonal surround. We're not talking about a cure. We're talking about mobilizing a natural healing process that we assume and that we know is present in the child. Just as if I cut my finger, immediately the finger begins to heal. How does that happen? I can't explain it. I don't know how it happens. And yet, I truly know at some level because it's working. Just as I know how to beat my heart, how to breathe my lungs, but I can't explain that. But somehow I do know how to do all these things. The body, the mind, and the spirit want to be whole. And what we're talking about is creating an environment that will nourish a natural process. Play will begin that process. It cannot cure what has been done in the past. Nothing can undo or erase what has been done in the past. We're only talking about the present moment. But that is the only moment we have. That said, once a child is invited to come out of the dark corner of their trauma and of their memory, that process must continue. So it is essential in any intervention that the people doing the intervention engage not only the child, but the family and the external perimeter of the child's life. If you change the shape of a piece of a puzzle, even though you think you've done a pretty good job and the shape now is bigger and stronger and so forth, and try to insert that piece back into the puzzle from which it came, it will not fit any longer. And the only thing that will happen, especially if the frame of the puzzle is rigid, is that that piece will now be popped out of the puzzle, or the piece will be banged back into the original shape. That's why it's so important whenever working with children to engage the entire interpersonal context. It's a great responsibility. But a child cannot be treated separate from the context in which they are growing. Just as a plant that is not doing well cannot just be plucked up and treated and then put back. We have to be wiser about our approach.